Pulling on. I'm feeling, 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 I'm feeling. Until I soak in wet. Rub your body, show no mercy, because I'm feeling tipsy, I'm feeling freaky. I wanna rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body. Let me rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body. I wanna rub and love up. I wanna rub and kiss up. I wanna rub and jam up. I wanna rub and rub up. I wanna rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body. Let me rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body.
If you are looking to have your statutory declaration, affidavit of income, identity, damage or lost passport, lost license, tenancy agreement, agreement of settlement, power of attorney, last will and testament, and certification of documents, then you need to visit the Alistair Collins firm, located at the Killian Mall, 162 Lamaha Street in Georgetown, between Camp and Waterloo Street. Alistair Collins is a commissioner of oaths and a justice of the peace. Make certain you visit him or call for more information at 649-6410 or 685-6448 or 503-1451. And there's adequate parking available. Go down to the Alistair Collins firm and have all of your legal issues settled and brought to the fore. Alistair Collins firm. Contact them at Alistair Collins firm.
That little ditty we used to torment our teachers with when we were kids goes something like this. Onward, upward, Mary had a go. Day by day she tied it to a rope, till at length they got busty rope, and Miss Mary had to run behind it. We had a lot of fun with that, but do you actually know how beautiful these words are? Here's the Song of Guyana's Children by W. Hawley Bryant. Born in the land of the mighty Roraima, land of great rivers and far-stretching sea, so like the mountains, the sea, and the river, great, wide, and deep in our lives would we be. Onward, upward, may we ever go, day by day in strength and beauty grow, till at length we each of us may show what Guyana sons and daughters can be. In the land of Kaijur, shining splendor, land of the palm tree, the croton and fern, we would possess all the virtues and graces, we all the glory of goodness would learn.
All right. Hey, guess what? Good evening. Don't be fooled. This is the kind of night when you see things happening, you see strange things happening. That's the kind of facial expression one would have, right? It's like, what the heck just happened there? You know what I mean? And that seemed to have been the sort of mood some people have been in all day. Like, really? Did that actually happen? Hey. You see strange things. And when you see strange things, you question these strange things, right? And it leaves you shocked. But look, I tell you what, things do not leave me shocked any longer. People's actions do not leave me shocked any longer, because sometimes you've got to be prepared for the unexpected. And when you see things happen, and of course, people would try to justify things when it happens. They don't say that they have made an error. It is a boo-boo. It should never have happened. But what they do is, you know what I mean? You guys know exactly what I mean, right? Roxanne Bess. And speaking of Roxanne Bess, I know you're still looking for justice for your son. And one of these days, we will talk about that right here on 107.1 FM. And so this is the kind of face. It's like, really? And even though you should just be quiet, you're just going on and on and on in order to explain something that doesn't need explaining, and that people are not that stupid. They're not gullible. Garfield Collins, good evening to you. You have some questions to answer. And when we do meet up for a beer or whatever, you'll have to talk. Seriously, you'll have to talk. right? Garfield Collins, good evening to you. Well, good evening to all of the other beautiful listeners out there, those who are listening on the ground in Guyana and those who are in other parts of the world that are tuning in right now to hear Big People Show. Real discussions, mind you, where we talk about issues and how we solve these problems in society. Michelle Lampkin, how are you? Right? Remember, local government elections is coming up, and you've got to talk about solutions to problems. Now, don't make me give you guys this face right now, because if a particular individual come next to me right now trying to explain anything, I don't need anybody to explain and justify, right? Kerwin Adams, we're grown-ups. We're not silly. We're not dotish people, mind you. Now, I'm not going to spend 2 hours saying, share the link, share the link, share the link, share the link. No, if you want to share the link, you share the link. I'm not going to beg you guys to share the link. I'm not going to beg you guys to go and subscribe to our YouTube channel. But if you want to, we'd appreciate it very much, right? All right, we have coming up Mr. Nigel Hughes is going to be with us. And I want to quickly remove this sort of facial expression, because I have a lot of respect for Nigel Hughes. Nigel Hughes is a kind of guy, when he does things, he doesn't do things and then we have to end up seeing it on social media and say, really? Nigel did that? No. Or if you're in a salon, mind you, if you're in a salon and you're doing your hair, I can just imagine what can happen to you when you see things that leaves you in things that leave you in, really? Did he actually do that? And I'll get into the meat of the matter. Did he actually do that? Did he actually walk in there and did he? No, you didn't do that. Stop it. Not only no, you didn't do that, but why are you trying to justify doing something that should never have been done in the first place? And now, before we get to our guest, I need to get into discussion with you guys this evening. And if people need to go through the rules of protesting and the rules of engagement, well, then I'm willing to do that. I've been doing this for over 20-something years. Over some 20-something years. And I'll tell you guys this. But before I tell you guys this, let me say good evening to all, every single one of you, and welcome to Straight Up. I'm not knocking anybody out of any personal thing at all, because, Guyanese tend to like to say that people are being personal with each other. No, I haven't called any names at all. But to say that I'm pissed off, no, I wouldn't say that. But this is my expression. Really? Now, let's get down to bits and pieces. I want to talk about this here. Now, that's here. That's my friend. He's still my friend. We might disagree on issues and so forth sometimes. But Rickford Burke, look at squeezing that hand there. Mark Phillips' hands. Now, I have issues. I don't have issue with anybody meeting with Mark Phillips. I don't. I swear I don't. But the other day when this guy, Dr. Mark Curtin, met with Mark Phillips, a former student of his at the University of Guyana, it was a very casual event, I was told. He met with his former student. People were actually pissed off. They were calling Dr. Mark Curtin all sorts of, and why is he standing there with the enemy and this and that? And days after, here it is, Rickford Burke standing there, shaking hands with Mark Phillips. Where it was supposed to shut down, kick out, and chase these people away. That is what this event was about. Shut down, kick up, and chase them away. Chase them out. Because remember, this is how we do it in Brooklyn. Is this really how you guys do it in Brooklyn? Now, what a protest. I understand protest. I've been there. And the only time you get to this point of engagement is when it benefits everyone, including the protesters. Now, I've been on protest with in front of police stations and so forth and so on, where police commissioners of police, they've called us in, protesters, to sit at the table and negotiate and walk away with something beneficial. Nothing, I say absolutely nothing was gained from this engagement other than a photo op that made this guy, Mark Phillips, walked away with points. Not Rickford Burke. There's no justification there. Mark Phillips walked away with points because he got what he wanted, which was a photo op. And now let me show you guys this before we get into our guest, because I don't want to bring my guest on and get them into this sort of ricketics. I call it ricketics because our first guest, Mr. Nigel Hughes, is going to be talking about legal matters. So let me get all these things out of the way quickly, because I don't want Nigel to say, well, you know, Mark, there are certain things I don't get involved in, and I'd appreciate if you don't ask me these sort of things, right? That's Nigel, a straight shooter, but he'll be on with us shortly. Listen to this here, and I'll explain it. I'll break it down to you as to where the mistakes were. Here goes.
But I did mention that we have what we call a one policy. And all our plans for the development of Ghana is for the benefit of all the people at home and in the diaspora. And that includes the guys who protest outside here. And I'd like you to convey that.
Well, thanks, Prime Minister.
No, wait a minute, man. I'm upset. The Burke that I've known would allow, after Mark Phillips made his point, and now for months we have been saying and describing the PPP as installed regime. There's really no president, there's no prime minister, there's nothing, installed regime. After Mr. Mark Phillips made his point, of course, political propaganda, but one Guyana and all these things, he walked away. Now, I wouldn't accept that. I wouldn't walk into a place that I'm protesting against and to kick out and to this, walk in. And making a point, the man walked away. And then to address the man as, Mr. Prime Minister, look, man, look. I may invite Rickford Burke on the show to explain all of these things, but something isn't right. It is not justified. You don't do that. In a protest, you don't do that. And this has nothing to do with him shaking hands with Mark Phillips. Absolutely nothing. But it was the wrong place, wrong timing, and every single thing. You do not do that at all. The only person that walked away as the winner there is Mark Phillips. Not the protesters, not Rickford Burke, not Guyana, not the people that we are fighting for. Mark Phillips got what he wanted. A photo op and propaganda that follows. Now, let me get straight to our guest this evening. Sorry that I got a bit worked up, and sorry that I have to bring my guest on under these circumstances. I have taken many photographs with attorney at law Nigel Hughes, and I would say publicly that I'm proud that I have taken so many photographs with Nigel Hughes, a fighter, a man who stands up and represents people. Good evening to you, Mr. Nigel Hughes. How are you?
Good evening, Mark. Always a pleasure to listen to you. I know you love to stir, and that you've been doing excellently tonight. Again, let me repeat my gratitude to you for your continued efforts at bringing information, analysis, and education to your audience.
Thank you so much, Nigel. And let me return it by saying thank you so much for what you do for those people who need proper representation throughout Guyana. And also, let me take the time out to salute you for what you did to those residents in Wortsmanville, is it?
No, Working Rust.
Working Rust. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Let me just thank you. I didn't get an opportunity before. I just wanted to thank you for actually taking that live. The people were deeply appreciative of it, especially the recipients of our little tokens of appreciation. They really did appreciate it.
You guys did a lot, and it's so nice to see the two former treason accused. There was no evidence, there were nothing against these individuals, but they spent over a year in prison. so nice to see them there, and the fact that they came all the way, miles away, to assist you guys on that day when the fire was taking place.
Yeah, that was absolutely heartwarming. That Carol and Bruce would travel all the way from where they were upon hearing the news on social media. I think they heard it either in your program or somewhere else, and traveled down to Hatfield Street and helped us save the building. They were very instrumental. So a lot of humbling and thankful moments.
Lots indeed. Mr. Nigel Hughes, let's begin with this. I'm not sure, and you can correct me. Are you representing Miss Roxanne Myers?
I am.
Okay. There was a case today that was disposed of, I think, by Justice Holder, where they wanted this trial to be done, the DPP that is. Justice Holder ruled against the DPP. Can you briefly explain what transpired today and what the ruling was all about, sir?
Okay, so I wasn't actually the ruling today, but I can certainly give you the history of the case and how they got there.
Sure, sir.
After they had charged Miss Myers, we appeared before Magistrate Miss Daly, and they charged her with an indictable offense, which means that that's a serious offense. And there is an option that the magistrate had, whether to allow the matter to continue indictably, which means that you would have to go through a preliminary inquiry before the magistrate. And then when that is finished, you would actually go to the High Court before a judge and jury. When the case was filed, we said to the magistrate, or we submitted to the magistrate, that we wanted this case to go indictably, because these allegations against Miss Myers we thought were serious, and we would prefer to have her face 12 members of the jury, 12 peers, 12 citizens of Guyana, who would be the ultimate judge, rather than have the magistrate hear it summarily. The prosecution, who filed the case, wanted the matter to be heard summarily. After having heard arguments, the magistrate ruled that she was going to allow the matter to proceed indictably, i.e. go before the judge and the jury. The prosecution was very unhappy with this ruling, and rather than proceed with the matter, they applied to the court to quash the decision of the magistrate, saying that the magistrate was wrong in law. And I rather suspect this afternoon that was the matter in which Justice Holder ruled. I, at the time, unfortunately, was somewhere else. But she was not actually a party to that matter, because what happened in that case was that the prosecution applied to quash the decision of the magistrate. So Roxanne Myers herself was not a party to the proceedings.
All right, thank you for that explanation, and we really do appreciate that. Let's go to this main matter, which is why you're up here, which is dangerous because scores of folks are in prison and have done prison time, even though there was absolutely no evidence whatsoever. Here's a case: ex-cop Colin Bailey freed of charge of murdering wife after prosecution concedes it had no case against him. Mr. Nigel Hughes, you're the lawyer for this. Explain, please. What's going on?
Mark, I just want to start with the words of the prosecution and then the words of the judge. But today, after being in prison for 5.5 years, after having been charged with the offense of murder, the prosecution admitted, after being asked by the judge, these three things. One, at the time that you filed the charge against Mr. Bailey, did you have any evidence against him? Response of the prosecution, no. At the close of the case in the magistrate's court, did you have any evidence against Mr. Bailey? No. Final question. When you indicted Mr. Bailey for murder in the High Court, did you have any evidence against him? No. So in other words, the prosecution, not the judge, the prosecution admitted that from the start and at every single stage after that, they had no evidence. The victim or who died in 2013, Mr. Bailey was charged in 2015, 2 years after, and I'll come to that later. And from 2015 to The 13th of October 2021, he sat down in prison. His situation was made worse for these circumstances. We wrote to the Director of Prosecutions no less than 5 or 6 times while he was sitting in prison saying, you don't have a case, but can you please bring his case up for hearing? Because they were not bringing his case up for hearing. And this is what they did. The first time they brought the case up before Justice Singh. Justice Singh could not hear the case because Mr. Bailey was a client of his before in a civil matter. So he couldn't hear him. He recused himself. They then brought the case up before Justice Kissoon. Justice Kissoon was a member of the chambers that represented Mr. Bailey and couldn't hear it. So he recused himself. And then after that, on every single successive assizes, for the next 4 assizes, when Justice Singh and Justice Kissoon were sitting, they kept bringing the case up before them, knowing fully well that they could not hear it. So in other words, he was placed on the list before a judge who they knew could not hear the matter. We wrote to them when it came up on the 4th occasion before Justice Kissoon and said, look, we have written to you before indicating that Justice Kissoon cannot hear this matter. Can you please have this matter transferred to Justice Reynolds, who was the other judge who was sitting in the assizes? They refused to do it. So the matter came up again, next session, never heard. And then this is what I think really was most egregious. When this case came up before Justice Barlow last week, Friday, for case management, that's where you discuss the case and you deal with all the issues that are likely to come up and you sort them out beforehand so you don't have to waste the jury's time. Justice Barlow asked the prosecutor specifically, do you have any evidence against Mr. Bailey? Please go and check with your superiors because I don't see anything against Mr. Bailey here. Mr. Todd, who represented Mr. Colin Grant, the co-accused, indicated to the court that Mr. Grant was going to plead guilty and that he, from perusing the record, did not see any evidence against Colin Bailey. They came back on Monday and they still continued to present the charge for murder after the judge had given them an opportunity on Friday to withdraw this matter. And they presented at least 10 or 12 witnesses who had nothing to say to implicate Mr. Bailey while he sat in prison. That is a scary, scary place to be. And you may say, well, okay, this might have been a mistake. But Justice Barlow in her statement today says, I'm going to speak today because this has happened on at least 3 to 4 occasions in another county where she was sitting, where people came up before her as the presiding judge, charged for murder, where there was no evidence. Mark, we are in a frightening place. If people can sit down in court, in prison, for 5.5 years, 6 years, and there is no evidence against them. None. Where the lawyers have written to them saying, look, please have a look at the case, there's no evidence. But worse, when the judge says to you before the case starts, I don't see any evidence, please go back, speak to your superiors about this, because otherwise you will just have me wasting judicial time having to write down the evidence of witnesses who cannot establish anything against the accused. That is how scary this is.
And you know, Mr. Hughes, it's very scary indeed, because while all of this is happening, the accused have been languishing in prison for over 5 years. Of course, Justice Barlow knows about these things, and I'm glad that she spoke out about that. In fact, she says that it happened in another court, or at least 3 or 4 times in another court where she was presiding. She came through the DPP chambers. She was once Deputy Director of Public Prosecution, and I do remember her during my case. I also have spent 5+ years at Camp Street there, knowing very well that there was absolutely no evidence. So Justice Barlow understands the system. I'm glad that they're speaking out now. But how unfair is this, not only to your client, but the possibility that scores of other individuals are sitting in prison right now without any evidence against them?
But this to me rocks the foundation of any confidence people would have in the administration of justice in Guyana. Certainly from the point of view of the prosecution, because all you have to do is recommend a charge in your case of treason, recommend a charge in the case of the now deceased Army officer of sedition. What's his name? Died a few years ago. The Sandhurst string, Oliver Hinkson. Yes. All you have to do is recommend a charge of sedition, and you don't have your liberty. Recommend a charge of murder, and your liberty is taken away. You don't get bail for murder. You go to the High Court, you don't get bail for murder. And this is a scary place because people will absolutely lose confidence in the administration of justice. Because if there are people sitting down in jail and there's no evidence, it's not a case where there may be weak evidence or that the scientific evidence or that the evidence disappeared. No evidence from the start. And this is what the prosecutor admitted. It's not a case where Nigel Hughes said, oh, they didn't have any evidence from the start. This is a case where the prosecution said that from the time this case came, we had no evidence to charge.
There is something I want to, Mr. Hughes, and sorry about that. You're the legal expert here. I'm not. But I'm a bit concerned that if the prosecution is saying this, and the prosecution is the DPP, they knew. Pardon me?
Yeah, the head of the Director of Public Prosecutions is the constitutional person responsible for the presentation of cases, yes.
So they knew, they're saying from the start, there was no evidence. Why didn't they years ago null pros this case if they knew from the start there was no evidence? This is baffling me right now.
Mark, it's more than baffling me. It's horrifying to me that you can actually have an admission by the prosecution that they had no evidence and that they would proceed with the case, knowing fully well that a man would not have his liberty. That is scary. Because all it means is that, the police can come pick up somebody and say, hey, this man is a problem. Charge him. Give him a murder charge, and that's it. You know what was worse? Mr. Bailey was a serving police officer at the time when this incident occurred, when this lady was murdered. And he was at Temeri International Airport, escorting, he was in traffic, escorting, I think it was Chavez, who was coming to visit Guyana, or one of the heads of state, who was visiting Guyana when this lady was murdered, when Miss Ramna Race was murdered. So he was doing official work for the police at the time the murder took place. And for 2 years after the murder, they had no evidence against him. The sister of the deceased got upset that nobody got charged, ran and spoke to some police officer, and then all of a sudden, without any evidence whatsoever, Mr. Bailey gets charged. Pure malice.
Absolutely devastating. You guys have heard this. This man spent over 5 years in prison. The DPP, the prosecution, is now admitting that even from the start, there was no evidence. Do they even review these cases when the case, the deposition is sent to them? Their job basically is to read up on these cases and to see that witnesses are there and that the evidence, that everything is ready for the assizes.
That's correct. There are several stages, if I could.
Go ahead, sir.
Before they charge somebody, they get a file from the police that says XYZ about the information or statements from various witnesses in the scientific reports post-mortem. So they review it before they decide whether to charge. Having reviewed it, they recommend a charge. The magistrate hears the case, and if the magistrate commits, they then get the deposition, which is a record of all the evidence that they intend to rely on. At that stage, they have to review it, because before they can present the indictment before the judge and the jury, they have to read over the entire record to see if the evidence that they intend to present actually can support the charge. So they have to review it, and that has to be a thorough review. So they would have reviewed it again then. And in this case, after the lawyer wrote to them saying, look, there's no evidence, you ought to at least call for the fine and review it to see, look, maybe we made a mistake. We wrote to them 4 to 5 times, and they continued to maintain it. They then put the case before 2 judges they knew could not hear it. And then finally, when the judge said to them, I don't see any evidence in this case, go away and speak with your superior, they came back and still presented the case.
And in presenting the case, during that presentation of the case, that is when they have realized that they have been cornered, and they had to admit that, look, we have no evidence. You were there. Are you convinced that the DPP chambers, someone in the DPP chambers or whomever, is playing games all along with this case and this man's freedom?
Mark, I would just say this. I don't wish to impute anything to anyone. I would just say that where there have been so many egregious breaches of the procedure, where the judge says to you, you don't have a case, go back, look at the file, you check with your superiors and come back, and you still present a case knowing fully well that there is no evidence, that there is no basis to charge that person. That to me signals that there's a big problem in the system, but more importantly, where the judge goes on to say, look, I have dealt with 3 to 4 other cases like this in another county. There is a problem in the system, and she begs them, please review the cases. It's scary because we now are in the position where we don't know how many people sitting down in Lusignan, in Timeri, in New Amsterdam, in Mazaruni are sitting down there when there's no evidence against them. That is a frightening place to be.
Very, very frightening. I can just...
And we love to talk about the rule of law. We love to talk about the rule of law. We love to talk about this is the rule of law must always prevail, that this is a democratic society, etc. So we have all these fantastic things that we are always speaking about. And here you have the most egregious breach of the rule of law by the persons who are responsible for administering it.
I can just imagine easy civil case, easy civil lawsuit against the state. They have admitted guilt already. If you're going to take a civil action against the state on behalf of your client, that shouldn't last 2 days.
Well, Mark, Guyana is a strange place, very, very strange place. And you talk about people who are have been wrongfully arrested and detained, and you're exceedingly familiar with this. A lawyer sits on the bench for an alleged traffic violation, sues the state for wrongful dismissal, for wrongful detention, arrest and detention for 2 hours, gets $2 million. The representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is in Guyana, 66-year-old man, unwell, diabetic, gets picked up without any reason at all other than he came down to meet with some opposition elements and speak to young people about the importance of being educated. Gets dragged out of his hotel at the Princess, taken to eat berry, locked up at 3 a.m. in the morning. His host, who invited him to Guyana to present, goes to find out what happens to him at 9, 10 in the morning. He gets locked up for going to find out about him. And then the barber of the host, who upon hearing that he's locked up, goes to find out why the host was locked up. He gets locked up. They keep them overnight in Brickdam, when you're very familiar, before it was refurbished, when it was considered inhumane by any standards. And they don't release him until about 36 hours after Mr. Elijah Muhammad calls the then president, Mr. Jagdeo, and says, what's going on? And he brings a civil suit. And we get 150,000 Guyana dollars for being locked up for 36 hours where the Chief Justice who gave the ruling said this was an egregious abuse of power. You work that out.
And not only that, I recall the Linden folks, those three guys who were murdered. Yeah. They got like about $500,000, $900,000, $1 million.
Absolutely.
And Absolutely. A lawyer was detained on the bench for about an hour, 2 hour or so, or whatever, and he got $2 million. I don't know.
So we're in interesting judicial times.
Interesting time indeed. You mentioned earlier, Mr. Hughes, that murder cases are not bailable offense. No. I thought that because even the highest charge in the land, treason, and you know I've been there, is a bailable offense. How do you explain that? Well,
is murder? You didn't get bail on treason. Did you get bail on treason? I don't know.
No, but I'm saying that the highest charge in the land is treason, and treason is indeed a bailable offense.
You don't get bail for treason, Mark. I'm sorry. You didn't get bail. Nobody gets bail for treason. Sorry?
All right. You're the lawyer.
No. You don't get. I mean, you'd have to have exceptional circumstances if you're in prison for 10, 12 years.
If you don't get bail for treason, if you don't get bail for treason, and I'm here to learn from you, sir. You're the lawyer, and I respect that. Why did my lawyers apply for bail?
Mark, you're asking me to review the advice you got. That's an unfair question. I mean, you know, it's actually, well, let me put it this way. There's a statute that prevents the magistrates from granting bail for murder and treason and other offenses. The High Court, in theory, can grant bail for treason and murder. In theory. There is no treason accused, starting with Arnold Rampersad, coming all the way forward to the Monroes. That I know.
Rampersad.
But yeah, all of them. Balram, yes, all of them. I don't know a single treason accused, including yourself, who has ever secured bail under any government at all. And you can go back to Arnold Rampersad and before, nobody. It is the most dangerous weapon. Because the allegation itself is serious, that you're attempting to overthrow the state. So
I got you, and I respect that. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, in theory, the High Court has jurisdiction to grant bail. Of course they can. I don't know of any case where that has happened.
Mm-hmm. But there are cases, murder cases, where folks have been granted bail, though.
I would stand corrected. All I'm saying is the court can grant you bail, but I personally I'm unaware of any, and I certainly have not had that luck.
All right. In closing, this actually puts the DPP in a very uncomfortable and embarrassing. Where a judge is admitting that she has dealt with several cases where persons have been languishing in prison for years without any evidence. What does this say about our judicial system, especially the advice coming from the DPP chambers and prosecutions?
No, it is the judge. So it's the judiciary that saved the day, because it's a judge who came forward and made these comments. It was Justice Barlow. The problem lies here with the prosecutorial services, the Director of Public Prosecution and that entire chambers, who had several opportunities to withdraw this case when there was no evidence. And it's the judiciary whose responsibility it is to protect the rights of the citizen against the might of the state that actually came forward and said, look, this is a case where you have abused the rights of a citizen. It is not acceptable. I've seen it happen in other cases. Completely unacceptable. And the prosecution admits to her that they had no evidence. Scary stuff.
Sorry about that. I lost you for a quick 30 seconds here, Mr. Hughes. Go ahead.
No. I don't know how much you did, how much you missed. But what I was saying, it was the judiciary that saved the day here. It is the judiciary that came forward and said, other arm, the prosecutorial arm of the state, this is unacceptable. You have abused the rights of the citizen. You've done it on other occasions, and this is the role of the judiciary to protect citizens from the might of the state. So in this case, the judiciary stood up and, discharged their functions admirably.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nigel Hughes, for oftentimes taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us. Anything else you wish to say before you go that I may not have asked that you want to say to our public?
No, Mark, I just want to share that information with the public and how this is a police officer. He was a senior police officer who was performing official functions at Temeri Airport, meeting presidents and escorting them as an outrider to the city. He had to be specially selected for that. And the murder happens while he's in duty, and this happens to them. Think of all the other innocent, flat-footed people who have suffered worse.
We'll say that. Just before you go, I just wanted you to say goodnight to my next guest, Sharma Solomon.
Dr. Solomon, how are you, sir?
It's honorable. How you doing? How you doing, Mr.
I'm good.
Let me say that it was okay to see that you were out there ensuring that you played your part and to ensure those good people of your community are also recognized for their efforts and service.
Thank you, and I salute you again.
Yes.
Hopefully we wouldn't have the same cause to come together insofar as the people in Linden are concerned, but good to see you.
No problem. No problem.
And Mr. Nigel Hughes, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Have a good.
Yep. Thank you so much, Nigel Hughes, dear attorney at law, talking about a situation that this is not the first time these things have happened in Guyana. And I can just imagine the amount of folks who are languishing in prison because of no case against them, no evidence, no case, no nothing. And if in fact the DPP chambers, they are aware of these cases, then they should review them quickly and have these individuals who are languishing in prison be released. It shouldn't have to come to this. 5+ years this guy has spent, Colin Bailey, has spent in prison, and only to hear this. After prosecution concedes it had no evidence against him. What a shame. What a shame. What is your take on that? I wonder how you're feeling, Mr. Sharma Solomon, now that you saw that and you heard what Nigel Hughes had to say. Injustice indeed, huh?
Well, thanks for having me on your program, Mark. As usual, let me give greetings and salutation to your guests, to the fellow guest, Mr. Hughes, and also to your audience. And quickly on that, it is most frightening. It is very unnerving. Guyana strives to become a liberal democracy, and most people peg that or believe that it's only with free and fair election. We forget separation of powers. We forget the issue of ensuring there's rule of law. And I think, as Mr. Hughes correctly outlined, the issue of rule of law is so viciously violated that it doesn't only do an injustice to those who are suffering behind bars, which included yourself and those who were charged before for treason with no evidence provided. But for those who are standing on the issue of murder, and we just heard about the issue with Mr. Colin Bailey, it is an injustice not only to him, but an injustice to the deceased, because we are still to find justice for that individual. That family is suffering to ensure that they can be someone held accountable for the murder of that young lady. So that is what the state needs to address, that you cannot be making certain claims of a democratic society that represents those issues that relates to your fact of being a democratic society. There is a serious breakdown of rule of law. And I think Mr. Hughes clearly outlined just some of the tragedies and travesties that have been occurring within our judicial system.
All right, well said, well put. Those of you who are now joining us, 49 minutes after 9 o'clock, we have the former chairman of Region Number 10, Mr. Sharma Solomon, is with us this evening, looking sharp, looking, I wouldn't say age, forget about the gray that we're seeing, but lots and lots of wisdom. Mr. Solomon, what is happening in your region, Region Number 10? What's going on? They seem to be very quiet at this point in time. But what is happening in Region 10, sir?
I think a repeat of the same. I believe there's an effort by those local leaders to highlight the travesties, the issues, whether it's at level of the RDC. We see works that are being done that needs correcting, while we see, for example, the Minister of Local Government proudly showing works in other communities that are done to the standard of acceptance and recognition. And whereas we have in our own region, the chairman, the councillors have to go out and to identify even residents. I know the residents of Middle Street, Silvertown, stop Middle Road from continuing because of the state of the work that was done. So, it brings me back in general, as you ask about Region 10 and Linden, we see that level of hypocrisy of what One Guyana means with regards to the treatment of an entire community. We saw the flood relief, $74 million. We hear people still complain about the cash grant issue. We have several matters where people are not having address with regards to how the government is seeing their development agenda within the region. So Region 10 continues to be one where this government holds a sort of brief for Region 10 that is evident in its action. It is quite loud in its calling with regards to how you see it being applied. And I really want to make that point, especially with the distribution of the flood relief program. I remember being on Dr. Rowe's show, and I told both him and Charles Shogrim that the government had absolutely no plan on how to deal with the issue of the flood, the nature of the flood, the impact that the flood would have subsequently caused. And Region 10 was used to demonstrate where that absence of a plan was. And we see that today, that there is convincingly by the Minister of Agriculture, by the Vice President himself, and even the President, that there is absolutely no plan with regards to how these things were done, to the point where the distribution of the grant to address the issue of the flood relief is paused so that an investigation could go forward, because you find now there's misappropriation of funds because of the absence and the lack of any plan. And Region 10 have been caught into that. So on the issue of food security, on the issue of cost of living and rising food prices, a region that is not in a position that produce many of the products that it consumes, you can see how this now adversely affects the people of that community. So Region 10 continues to hold firm nevertheless, Mark. I think over the past months gone by, Region 10 showed that it's at a state of alertness and readiness. I believe I had a conversation with the mayor this afternoon, and a very cordial conversation we do from time to time. And it was really about how do we ensure that the message is one where people have it clearly articulated so that they can understand the sort of action based on the treatment given that they can take with regards to fighting back against some of these transgressions.
Lots of transgressions indeed. Earlier today, there were two protests, a strike out with the sugar workers. Early in the day, I had Mr. Herney Parks with us here on 107.1 FM. The sugar workers protesting. And hours after, the people in Perth Village protesting because of this flood cash grant. They have been discriminated against. And the people there are just like the people in Linden, the people in Ituni, the people in Kokwani, and other areas in region number 10 have been discriminated against, not only for the cash grant, but for the COVID relief grant also. They're still waiting, thousands of them with their pink slips. What's happening? Those matters have not been addressed in terms of persons with their pink slips still waiting in Ituni and Linden and Kokwani. Still waiting on these political vagabonds in the PPP to return to give them some relief. The farmers are also waiting for the same thing. What efforts, or if any at all, is being done to ensure that these people get what they deserve? Proper
I think
compensation.
I think the effort needs to first highlight the handling of the matter to begin with, because that nullifies the government's justification of whatever action that they want to put forward as being part of the interest of Guyanese. I think that nullifies it to the point of it was done in isolation. It was done with the level of arrogance. I remember when the first cash grant of over $1 billion on the spot went to quarantine, and the Attorney General was very boastful on his show, announcing that this program put in the hands of those who are desperately in need immediately cash relief. And we'll come to just the sort of position, instead of having a more structured approach, as we heard, for example, Dr. Clive Thomas talk about cash transfer. We are now seeing something that goes as if it's handout to give people a desperate position of keep wanting more. But that was the claim made. It was that sort of behavior. We distributed $1 billion. And a week later, it was the said Attorney General who, on his program, announced that there are problems with that distribution. So I think that's the first thing. It must be highlighted that it's a mishandling, it's a poor handling. It represents the sort of removal of state resources to give to friends and family. And these are not our claims. These are the claims of hardworking farmers up in the quarantine. We saw one of the regional representatives resign because of this, Ramaya.
Dr. Ramaya, yeah.
Dr. Ramaya. He resigned because of the fact that it brought about the level of shame and embarrassment to the position that he held, and the sort of complaints that he were receiving from people on the ground that they were not being represented. That made its way to the Minister of Agriculture. So I believe more Guyanese, and I am quite certain in those areas, have accepted that there is a mishandling at that level of the cash grant for our farmers. There is an acceptance by the Minister of Agriculture who have initiated some form of investigation. I think that should be clearly articulated as to the farm structure, when this investigation will start, terms of reference of the investigation. We can't just, and this is where we need the sort of opposition accountability of, if the Minister of Agriculture said there is going to be an investigation, a follow-up. What is this investigation? He made that claim. The minister of the vice president, instead of accepting no plan, in a most reckless way, choose to accuse public servants of mishandling of this flood relief cash grant. So public servants, because of the poor planning, lack of action by this government, who were warned on several occasions, involve a wider stakeholdership, is now going to beat public servants as those who are misappropriating this fund. When we need an opposition to say the minister have asked for an investigation, we welcome this investigation, and to propose what sort of investigation can be done so that proper accountability can be made towards what was done, not only on the distribution of the cash grant. And many times we miss this mark, because in the mishandling of the grant, we've missed an opportunity to ensure that our farmers who suffered severely are given this sort of resources so that they are not indebted, they're not left to be poor, but they can get back to the job of ensuring they provide the sort of resources that can be on the plates and tables of Guyanese. And we don't have to have this sort of skyrocketing cost of living and food price increase. So I think that sort of approach must and should be taken, because the government have admitted not only that they've erred, but they want to investigate where those errors are.
Exactly, and that's what we should see by now that the opposition would be calling for. Of course, those in the opposition would say that Parliament will reopen soon, and it's a forum for them to pose those questions. But I agree with you that the guy who sits there as the Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Zulfikar, has said that they need an information, that they need to investigate. Sorry. So here is where the opposition now, maybe the shadow minister of Agriculture, I believe that is Mr. Kemaraj Ramjatan, would step in and say, we welcome this. Let us have this investigation. But since the guy who sits there as the who sits there as the Minister of Agriculture, since he made that public announcement, we have not heard a single word about that again. Not a
Most
word.
Unfortunate. Most unfortunate. And you asked earlier about those protests. Let me just get to that too. It is those protests are in themselves dangerous of what the government is doing. Is it right for what the workers are doing? Certainly. If you have money to give and you are prepared to give it for me, I will take that. It's unfortunate how they dealt with the flood relief effort. They have made the acceptance of an error in how they dealt with that. But with the sugar workers, the fact of the matter is, if you're going to give me more money on severance I received, I believe the danger in what the government is doing is they are setting the precedents for others who have been severed, others who have had their employment taken away and have been given, and we're not speaking only severance of recent past. I am from a community called Linden and Region 10, where the bauxite industry prevailed. And we've had several issues that in the past dealt with matters of severance. And if this is the precedence that is going to be set now by this administration, where you can give people grants in lieu of the fact that, or in fact added that you have given them severance, every single public servant, every single state employee is within their right to follow on this precedent and make claim for severance, for further grants to be paid along with the severance that have already been paid to them. So that is far from what this government intention is, which brings me back to then what is their motive with regards to this one Guyana that they preach? Is it something that they practice? No, because what we are seeing is that some are favored more than the other.
You know, it is so true, because everywhere they go, everywhere they travel, every meeting they have, whether it's in Brooklyn, Queens, Miami, wherever, they always peddle this nonsense, this trash about one Guyana. They really don't mean this one Guyana thing, but it seems to have been fixated in the heads of those individuals, not only Mark Phillips, but people like Irfan Ali and Jack Deo and all of the ministers talking about one Guyana, especially when they're out of Guyana, but they're dividing that damn country, man. Hypocritical indeed, Mr. Solomon.
Mark, these things come with structure. These things come with organization. If I can just say, for example, we saw and we heard our past president, the late Forbes Burnham, in his days speak when he was talking about cooperatives. And it comes from a conscious understanding of where we stand as an ideal, as a people. We as a people, the Africans cooperated to build the village movement. We came together. The Amerindians in our country were hunter-gatherers. They worked together. Our East Indian brothers and sisters after indentureship came together and they bought villages and lands and they farmed. The spirit of cooperatism, the value in that to propagate as an issue for people to embrace as a nation, the cooperative spirit, was there as a people that was promoted as an ideal, as a value, and further transfer to an economic model that today, even cooperatives and those credit unions are holders of some of the largest pool of monies within the state. So it was an understanding that people could have tangibly gravitate to and know. There were structures, you had cooperatives, you had these credit unions, you had them embedded in the constitution with regards to how they should function. One Guyana, however, it's just one Guyana as a talking point. There is no action. There is no structure. There is nothing that people can go back to and say these are the things that are being done to show and demonstrate there is one Guyana. So that is an example just to show there isn't just words behind molding a nation into an understanding of a direction. You have to show by action. You have to put structures in place. And this we can see is clearly not only without structure, but certainly hypocritical in its practice, as we see the behavior of the current administration.
And that behavior of the current administration leaves a lot to be desired. We know that they are out, they're targeting coalition supporters. They don't like persons of African descent. That is a fact, even though they have some persons of African descent that they put out there to talk about this one Guyana crap. It doesn't add up. It is not adding up. Look at all the persons who have been over 3,000 or close to 3,000. They have disputed that figure, those figures, sorry, but they have not presented the proper figures as to the amount of persons they have fired, the public servants. Look at how they treat the teachers. When the teachers protest, they insult the teachers, call them all sort of names and these sort of things. They have no respect, no regards for the teachers. But as soon as a couple of our cane harvesters hit to the streets, it's as though these folks in the catfish regime are trembling. They rush out. They offer them all sorts of deals. But yet this is the one Guyana they're talking about.
I think, Mark, you know, as I mentioned earlier with reference to ensuring these matters are properly articulated, I think the shock of the PPP came in terms of exposing the hypocrisy of what One Guyana represented. At the 15th of August, I think the international community certainly turned a spotlight. It is no easy feat to have a US senator and representative of government to turn their attention in such a vicious way of even identifying one of its own in its ambassador, and even identifying the action of the People's Progressive Party as not in line with what it's propagating and the policy of a One Guyana. That 15th of August meeting and some international relation highlight that emerged from that, because we know where the conversion of international and domestic issue meet is where we set our foreign policies. It was important that after that meeting, the PPP found itself in a position where it had to play catch up. So the issue of bringing this matter to fore, as important as it is, and I think continue to deserve that sort of highlight and recognition of there is no one Guyana, must continue to be highlighted. There is no structure for one Guyana. The issues that continue to affect Guyanese are contrary to what is being preached for one Guyana. So we have had our own interaction in 2013, compliments of yourself, Mark Benschop, to engage Akeem Jeffries and Yvette Clark and several others on some of the same things that we see with regards to human rights and the violation of human rights of Guyanese, and how this sort of racist treatment to a particular group of Guyanese would have resulted in...
And mind you, Mr. Solomon, this was back in 2013.
2013.
Almost 10 years.
We took the same matters to the same people. So I am very encouraged. Very encouraged. We had yourself, we had Mr. Norton, we had Ms. Kisoon, we had Rickford Burke,
Nigel Hughes.
Nigel Hughes, yeah. Pastor McKinnon. We had a very wide collective of people who represented various interests, but more importantly, the interest of Guyanese and Guyana, that brought these matters to the diaspora as foreign policy issues, so that the bilateral relationship established, we were all the way to the State Department, could be highlighted. And as I said, on the 15th of August, I was very encouraged that someone that we had spoken to made those announcements, because it could have only been after repeated efforts and seeing the obvious that there is no one Guyana, that people were being discriminated, that we had returned to extrajudicial killings, that these things that makes a liberal democracy to ensure that the rule of law is implemented, and even the extent of what is free and fair election. When the State Department in their report referred to the PVP as an installed government, those were highlights that people should be paying close attention to. But on the ground, to have it translated to action so that people can know that what is being said is not what is being done.
That is true, and the evidence is there, Mr. Solomon. I noticed somebody made a comment as I took a glance over to the comment section, and I just want to. It's not that I pay much attention to it, but look at this silliness from Asif Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Muhammad. Here's what he's saying: why you don't say how much public servant was fired by Granger? How many public servants were fired by Mr. Granger? By the way, it's President Granger to you, Mr. Mohammed. All right, and he was democratically elected as the president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, unlike what we're seeing here now. So I don't know. You got to stop this sort of brainwashing stuff the PPP they're doing to their supporters. Asif Mohammed, I feel sorry for you, my brother, but walk in peace, Mr. Solomon. Propaganda, of course. Propaganda. I just wanted to propaganda. I recalled, Mr. Solomon, not so long ago, you and I had a conversation. And you reminded me, let us hope that we haven't lost. I know Lemon had threatened to quit his job again tonight. Okay, he hasn't quit. He promised that he's going to walk off the job. All right? And that is how our operator, that is how they do things here, man. They walk off the job when they don't get it. They drank a couple of beers. 11 all the way there. Now, Mr. Saul, I forgot. And what you reminded me of was that our national hero, Coffee, right?
Yes.
Our national hero. We're having some technical problem. I get it fixed as quickly as possible. We'll appreciate that. Mr. Lemon, if you can please get your act together. We're having some serious technical problems on the ground. To get his act together, wake up, and please do your job, or else we'll send you to that church. Sorry about that, guys. Lemon is acting up, all because I said to Lemon that I'll send him to that church in Brooklyn, right? Mr. Solomon, that church in Brooklyn. Mr. Solomon, you in a conversation so long ago, you reminded me about this guy who's a national hero. And this guy was actually, what did you describe him as? I want you to remind me.
You know, Mark, one of the things we learned very early in school, and that shapes, in sociology, there is the culture, culture relationship. Once you know the culture of your society, it helps to bring structure to how you shape and how you value the things you see within our society. And the 1763, more so the hero identified within that revolution, Coffee, is touted not only by Guyanese, but across the world. I've always said this, I said this on several occasions. 1763 was before the French, the the Haitian, and even the US Revolution. So one could only see some sort of inspiration from that revolution. It wasn't just a revolution that made an impression because it occurred, but it was a revolution that established one of the first black states for almost 9 months. So that was the privilege of coffee. But who was coffee? Coffee was a house slave. And I always say to people, even as we refer to people that we find disfavor with their action, let us not forget our national hero, Coffee, was a house slave. You look at in the 1823 revolution, the Kwamina, he was a deacon. And you look in Jamaica at Samuel Sharp, he was in the fields. The fact of the matter is, our people, no matter where they've been placed, have always found and could still find, as we see people around the world, more so, I refer to the issue of heavy discrimination within Guyana towards Afro-Guyanese. No matter where you sit, you can still find the level of courage within you to form whatever revolution, to overcome whatever struggles that we have to overcome. And not because where you position makes you any less effective, as we have seen even from our own very national heroes, that you can sit in any position. Once you have the will and you see injustice, you must.
Sorry about that, Mr. Solomon. Some folks might, whilst you are correct in terms of Coffee, who was a house slave, there are different categories of house slaves. People may want to categorize. Some folks might say some talk name house slave, some house slaves who sit and plan as to how to free. So they may have Coffee at one of levels of a house slave who was able to sit down and formulate a plan as to how he would free his people. When there are some other house slaves who may sit and say, me ain't doing nothing, I can help to continue to oppress and suppress my people there. I find it strange, though, that persons who sit in positions who can assist their people just don't do that at all. In fact, they continue to help or to be part of an oppressive system whilst rushing out there to talk about one Guyana. They're part of an oppressive system to continue to oppress their brothers and sisters without voicing their opinions. But what they oftentimes do is to justify their actions of the oppressors. We have seen that over the years of my good friend Samuel Hines. Always does that. There's always a justification for people who are oppressed.
You know, Mark, I watched the interview a few days ago with yourself. Most unfortunate that the then Prime Minister is holding a position of ambassador, and the sort of response that you receive from him. I remember quite well. And I know, unfortunately, today I saw the circulation of our current Prime Minister. The image is stirring some amount of controversy. We have had our share of I would not say hiding from, but making a significant effort to avoid Samuel Hines. We found him very offensive as an individual. We found his actions to be condemned. When those 3 men were killed, there was no remorse in Sam Hines. There was no effort to demonstrate to the families who lost their loved ones that he was sympathizing with them in any way. In fact, he was more concerned about people being able to travel unimpeded. And we have always made an effort to not welcome any gesture by Sam Hines that is not in line with a diplomatic approach. Of course, diplomacy in dealing with issues of political matters become very relevant and important. But one could remember, when we showed diplomacy to Sam Hines, it was on the 21st of August. He was sitting next to the chairman of the region, yours truly, signing an agreement to show that you're not going to take photo ops with us so that we can have a kumbaya moment. It's going to be tangible. It's going to be on behalf of the people. It is going to ensure that the sort of injustice that was being perpetrated more by Sam Hinds and his government to bring high increased electricity tariffs were not going to be implemented. And those are the photo ops that you look to take with prime ministers with reference to ensuring that they do their jobs. I know after that, several times after that, Sam Hinds would have made efforts to have photographs taken with both myself and Ms. Kisoon, which we avoided. And even after we would have relinquished our office, including Sam Hinds, there were efforts to take photographs with us. So the optics of these matters become very, very important with regards to messaging at times. And I know the PPP is very skillful, even at the time of Sam Hinds, and I see the now Prime Minister is quickly catching on, to spin matters beyond what they are. But as I said before, I personally avoided having any interaction because I know not unless we were going to meet to resolve the issues that we had legitimate concerns about, which we did in August 21st, that we were going to meet to take any other photographs with Sam Hinds or any prime minister for that fact.
In fact, that is exactly, I can't disagree with you, Mr. Sharma Solomon, at all, because what they oftentimes do is try to get a photo opportunity to present the wrong narrative to their support base or even those outside of Guyana that things are hunky-dory. I am so glad that you guys have avoided that photo op because Sam Hinds so badly wanted the photo op. And I just want to remind folks that if he wasn't as arrogant as he was, because on the day when the folks were protesting on the bridge for justifiable reasons, Sam Hinds in an interview, when I called him for an interview, I always call Sam Hinds for an interview, and he always puts his foot in his mouth, right? And so on that day, he basically just said, whatever happened, happened. And I never forget him, never forgot him for that.
Yes,
but
yes.
We oftentimes must avoid.
Lyndon, I've never forgotten and forgiven him for that either.
Yeah, never allow them to have a photo opportunity, regardless of how one may want to justify it. There's no reason for that. And you have mentioned that the time that you guys sat side by side with each other was when he was the PM and you were the chairman of Region 10 to sign an agreement after the people of Linden won. Good job.
Yeah, well, the job is one that did not come without blood, sweat, and tears. And that is what made the job even more important. Important that every aspect of it was represented by action by the government that Sam Hinds represented. In fact, one would have thought that Sam Hinds, who served as not only a member of the community within the bauxite sector, but even as a member of parliament of the community at one time, would have appreciated just his responsibility to the people of that community. And without demonstrating that, I think it was important for him to be reminded that he has an obligation to ensure that he represents the interests of those people who felt very hurt after the 18th of July, when 3 of the citizens of that community, Alan Ron and Boe, was murdered. You know, they were murdered and not even recognized by their prime minister, who should have brought this sort of recognition to the injustice that they face. So when we were out there for 32 days, it was clear that not without action, meeting with Donald Ramatar, then president, and even Roger Luncheon, then head of the secretariat, Sam Hinds, who represented the issue, had to sign an agreement that reversed an action that Sam Hinds was responsible for. Now, this is not something we had started to agitate for because it was coming. People had already started to receive increasing electricity bills at over 1,500%. So what Sam Hinds in essence did, and what the PPP accepted, was an error in the way they approached that matter that resulted in the loss of lives of people and several dozen being injured even after the 18th of July, people like Randy Tello and people like Ray Wills who were injured. So Sarmines had to be held highly accountable first and then prove, because people were willing to hold him to account for 32 days, that he is willing to accept, which they did by signing that agreement on the 21st of August, that they err in not having people constitutionally, which is provided for in Article 13, be given a chance to be part of the decision that affects and impact their lives. That is provided for, and their leaders must be a part of that, which eventually happened. So I think there is very little credibility for Sam Hines and the way that matter was handled, more so in general, the PPP government. And right after that, 5 years on, we're seeing an exact repeat of the go it alone attitude of the PPP.
It's not going to work. They oftentimes want things their way. And so what they do is, even if when they're protesting and so forth, and you have spoken about an example, and I like the way you guys have handled that, is to avoid the photo ops. Regardless of what, there's no time to negotiate during a battle. You don't just rush in and negotiate and shake hands. It's not going to happen, because oftentimes you play right into the hands of the political enemies. And I hope some people would take a page of your book, Mr. Sharma Solomon. Your closing remarks, sir.
Always as usual, Mark, thanks for having me on. And thanks for bringing insight on many of these matters. I think this is where it starts. It starts with conversation, discussion, but more so that leads to articulation of a clear message on the issues that are affecting Guyanese. And there are many issues affecting Guyanese. I always say, whether it's the issue of COVID in itself is such an out of control issue that hundreds of Guyanese are losing their lives without the sort of holding to account the Minister of Health, for example, in how, in many regards, I'll give you this one too, Mark. I want to compliment and commend the Mayor of Georgetown for insisting to the Prime Minister, who at the time was acting president. As I have always said, the government needed to take a holistic stakeholder approach. Very first, invite the unions, invite the opposition, invite communities around, whether they're represented by NDCs or municipalities. They did none of that. They went ahead and fight this pandemic, a global pandemic, on their own, resulting in so many deaths. So kudos to the mayor, who insisted, as he should have, based on his constitutional office that he holds as a representative of the people of Georgetown, that he must be part of the National Task Force. And I see today that the Prime Minister, though this one Guyana should have been so easy for him to see the importance of a stakeholder participation, I've welcomed the mayor. So kudos to the mayor for insisting on being accepted on that. But not only with COVID and at that level of handling, Mark, but the level of just the handling of how people are being, the policies and the protocols are being applied. And then you move to the issues of the economy. Guyanese continue to suffer. And what do they get? They get handouts as if they're mandicons. Not in a structured way, but today we wake up and we hear 25 for you, 25 for you, 25 for you. And these things are not being done to address seriously the needs of Guyanese, because when that is done, equal to that we see cost to live in, equal to that we see mass retrenchment and people being sent home. So that sort of confusion, Mark, is there in the society. I am certain people will find the means and the message to articulate clear. Because with clear articulation on these matters, I am certain people will fall in line to not only object, but will protest at any given chance they get against any type of thing that this government is doing that they don't find favor with. And there are many, many, many things. Those cash grant, those flood relief, It's atrocious. There is no plan on any of these things. There is no paper that one can pick up and look at first. In theory, there is no structure that is established in practice. So for example, what represents one Guyana? There is no structure. So people are going to find these things to be hollow, without meaning, without depth, and they're going to challenge them.
They will do that indeed, and people are challenging them. This one Guyana is just a facade. It's fake. It doesn't mean anything. It's very hollow. Their interpretation of a one Guyana is when you sing their tune, when you jumped on the stage and sing their bacchanal, do their dance. To hell with them. They don't practice what they preach. Mr. Solomon, Sharma Solomon, thank you so much, and thank you for what you have done for the people of Region 10 as well. Hope to see you back in the political arena sometime soon, and even more active, so that you can stand up and represent your people. Because what we need are people who can stand up and represent their people, their constituency. We need that. We need much more of that. We need people who can stay strong on the protest line as well, and don't give the political opponents any sort of leeway to spread their propaganda and so forth. We're seeing that right now. Mr. Solomon, thank you so much. Give my regards to your family.
Thank you for having me on, Mark.
Thank you for being on. All right. We've got to go, though, but quickly before we go, and again, let us go back to what happened earlier. There was a strikeout in the current team. Let us hope that the opposition put boots on the ground, and go and find out what is happening. There was a protest out there in Perth Village. Let us hope that the opposition put boots on the ground and go and try to represent these people at every step of the way. Today, the leader of the opposition, along with a shadow minister in the black there, shadow minister of Home Affairs, Miss Geeta Chandan Edmond. They were out there. They met with the mother of the young man who was killed by police. This young man, Grove resident, 34, killed by police during what the police are saying, shootout. So the leader of the opposition and the shadow minister of Home Affairs, they were out there. I assume that this is the mother. I don't want to give my mouth liberty, but looks like the mother of the deceased. And so, we are seeing these sort of things have returned to Guyana. We just can't sit down and allow them to happen. And I want us to close on this here now. This is my opinion. I have seen some of your comments. You seem to think that you cannot take someone's opinion. There is no way that I'm saying anything other than the fact. I've said that Burke is my friend. He has been my friend for 20-something years. I believe this was a wrong move. And why can I say that this was a wrong move? Do not go into the church. You go there to basically protest. You say that chase them out. They're not welcome. You don't change your mind halfway through this midfield, and you walk in there to ask a question. And what do you expect them to say? They're going to shake hands. They're going to take the photo up, and they will become the propaganda in spreading this. Burke, this was not the right move. It was not the right time for this. The time is not now for shake hands at all with these individuals. They're not concerned about doing good for Guyana. They're just not concerned. And next time around, Rickford, don't make this move again, because you're going to spend all day, all week trying to counter their propaganda, because they're using this for propaganda purpose. That is what they're doing, Rickford. They are using this for propaganda purpose. And we don't need that at this time. We just don't need that. There is no justification, absolutely no justification for this at all. Mr. Burke had asked to be on the program this evening, but he showed up on another platform. Let me say this, that he is welcome to come on to talk about whatever that is necessary. And some of you out there who believe that I shouldn't be, you attacking Burke. Am I attacking Burke? I'm saying it was a wrong thing because he played into the hands and the PPP propaganda. All Mark Phillips spoke about was one Guyana. Oh, we are doing this and we do. They don't have time. So they use that opportunity as a propaganda. Wrong move, Rickford. Wrong move. Wait, man. I can't tell Rickford that is wrong move. There is no justification in doing that. Wrong move. Damn it. It's a wrong move. Why can't I say that? Wrong move. And then on top of that, Mark Phillips walked away, even whilst Burke was making a point. Walked away. A sign of disrespect. Because walked away because he didn't want to say anything. He didn't want to say anything else. He didn't want to hear anything else because he believed that he proved a point. Walked away whilst Rickford was speaking. Walked away. In other words, I don't talk. I don't have time with you.
But I did mention that we have what we call a one policy. And all our plans for the development of Ghana is for the benefit of all the people of Ghana, at home and in the diaspora. And that includes the guys who protest outside here. And I'd like you to convey that to them.
Well, thanks, Prime Minister.
Walked away because he believed he made his point. The propaganda will start to spread. The propaganda. No, man. Wrong move. Wrong move. The propaganda they're spreading already. There's no justification, Rickford. Absolutely no justification. This is a brotherly, public criticism of what happened there. And I don't want some of you to come with dotishness about Burke and Burke and don't come with dotishness. I'm entitled to my opinion. But if you're going to have an opinion, to be constructive in your opinion. Not because I say wrong move, Burke, means that I'm against Burke or I don't like Burke. Stop with the BS. Stop with the BS. It's just the wrong move. That's all it is. Wrong move. Played right into the hands of them, Rickford. And there's no justification for that. Let us brush it off and move on. Just don't make that mistake again. I've been at this for over 2 decades as a professional protester, and I know that it is something that should not have happened. Now, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with shaking Mark Phillips' hands. I'm not saying anything is wrong with that. But the time was not the right time. That was not the time for that at all. If you're going to chant them out, if you're going to chase them out as what the protest was supposedly all about, well, do that. Don't go and sit down and break bread with them. Don't do it. Burke, you're my brother. I love you. Take this as constructive criticism. Don't do it again. I've got to go, man. God bless you. God bless our beautiful country. But I can't leave without letting you guys know how I feel when I saw that handshake. And then when I called my friend Beverly and I told her what happened, this is what Beverly said. This was a photograph Beverly sent to me via WhatsApp. I love you guys. I'll be back tomorrow, same place, same time, right here. If we're going to win this battle, then it has to be played properly. That's all I'm saying. It has to be played properly. This battle is not, and this struggle is not a one-man struggle. This battle, this struggle is not a show. It's not for a show. It's not for a prove a point. This struggle, if done in unity, trust me, much can be achieved. It's not a struggle to see and to show and to prove a point and to jump on a stage and parade and all these things. Time for some of you to change course. But for now, I thank all of you for tuning in this evening. Some of you may not agree with what I've said, but you're entitled to your opinion. It is democracy. It's freedom of speech. Until tomorrow, same place, same time. God bless you. And to all my guests, my two guests, Nigel Hughes, attorney at law, and former chairman of Region Number 10, Sharma Solomon. Good. Yeah, sorry about that. Mr. Sharma Solomon. Mr. Sharma Solomon. Thank you, guys. Until tomorrow, same place, same time. God bless you, and God bless our country. God bless those smart protesters, too.
It's hard to be at peace with the ones who are so discard. It's hard. Them have a knife in your back and them smile it so broad. Help me to deal with the ones them who say them love me when them really don't. Help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd a shout. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. Cause the booby traps with them set is real. I never want to take your glory, Lord. Send your angels to encamp around about me and stand guard. To envy is so easy and to love it is so hard. Let me work for your glory and not for the award. Don't make me ever get caught up in the scream and the applause. And go talk about the blessing and not talk about the Lord. All these things are vanity. I need your reward. Let me be real. Don't put on no facade. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Help me to deal with the fans them give me flesh when the crowd a shout. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. Cause the booby traps with them set is real. Sticks and stones can break my bones and words can harm me. They can harm me. When the evil come against me, you'll protect me. You'll protect me. Father, I need the strength of your son. Jesus. Cause you know my work is not done. Lord, I need that endurance just to finish this race that I run. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. And help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd are shout. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. Cause the booby traps with them set is real. You tell me if you stand firm. Cause every little plan you have a confirm. I know them evil plan turn. In a darkness me a the lantern. So help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Jesus, help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd a shout. Help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. Cause the booby traps with them set is real. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd a shout. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. Cause the booby traps with them set is real. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Help me to deal with the fans them